cases of free persons. If an enslaved person is accused of any crime, if anyone is accused of misdemeanors, or individuals have civil cases against each other, those are all handled on the county court level. We do have James City County Court a little further down due to Gloucester Street. As the name implies, there's one of those in every county. They meet once a month to handle all that variety of business. This one serves all of Virginia and will meet every 3 months, totaling 4 times a year. So looking around the room, you might find this feels familiar to courtrooms you've seen on TV and other places. We don't significantly change this system, especially right after the Revolution. We were actually pretty happy with the British court system. We thought it worked well, so we'll do a lot of copy and pasting. As we go through the next couple hundred years, we'll make some adjustments, change our minds about a few of the details, but much of the structure does remain the same. For now, we're in the court of Queen Anne. She was the reigning Queen of England when this building was completed in 1705, so it's named in her honor. Presiding over the court is in the horseshoe bench back here, would have been the 13 justices, also known as the governor and his council members. On the side table, we would have the king's attorney. We would think of that as the attorney general, the prosecuting lawyer today, and maybe a defense lawyer. Under British law, you had a right to any lawyer that you hired. So if you can pay a lawyer their fee out of your own pocket, no one can stop them from coming in here or interfere with their work, but it is up to you to pay them. If you don't have the money to do that, you just don't get a lawyer. Even in the United States, it won't be until the 1960s that we have universal guarantees of defense lawyers in all states. On the other side here, we've got 12 men eligible to vote, serving as the jury. Half of them will come from the city of Williamsburg and most likely sit through all of that section's proceedings. Because they are so close, they're easy to get a hold of. The other half will likely change with each individual case, because under British law, you have a right to a jury of your peers. Peers in the 18th century is understood as neighbors. We want people from the same county as the accused because we want them to know the accused, either personally or at least by reputation, and take that knowledge of their character into account when they make their judgments. So with that is everyone who has passed the bar. The accused stands before the bar. Anyone with evidence or witness testimony can approach and share that information. Once we've got all the evidence, we'll send the jury away to another room where they get no food, no water, and one chamber pot between them. They are not allowed out without a unanimous decision. We do not believe in juries in this country. So I think that takes too long?
No.
We're doing our best to motivate them. When they do come back, if the person is found innocent, great, they did nothing wrong, they can go home. If they're found guilty, technically every felony crime had the exact same punishment, to be hung by the neck until dead. What? However, we do acknowledge that some felonies don't feel as bad as other felonies. For example, stealing anything above a certain value becomes felony theft. Maybe if you manage to steal something really expensive without actually hurting anyone, that's not as bad as purposely deciding to murder someone. So for what we consider lesser felonies, things at the bottom of the list, they will still read the death sentence. That remains the official policy, but the person is allowed to ask for benefit of clergy instead. Benefit of clergy means we've got these iron pokers. We've got the letter T on the end of this one. They'll be put in a bed of hot coals until that letter is glowing red, and then placed on the base of the person's thumb until they can say, "God save the king," because the king is the one giving us alternatives to execution. The other one I have is M for manslaughter, so it's determined that they were responsible for a death, but we don't think it was planned or intentional, so we're willing to give a second chance for that. And that really is the point of benefit of clergy, a second chance to go back out into society, hopefully make some better decisions. But it comes with challenges, because if that letter is burned into your hand, everyone knows what that means. So if you've got a T on your hand, Shopkeepers may not be super thrilled about seeing you in their store. They may not want to give you a job. They may not want to work with you on business. So there's challenges, but you're alive to try and navigate around those challenges. However, if someone is brought before the court again, found guilty of any felony crime, same, different, doesn't matter. If they're found guilty and there's already one letter on their hand, well, they wasted one second chance. So now the execution would go forward. Any questions? Our next stop will be upstairs. It is 30 steps up. If anyone would prefer not to do stairs, you can go across the piazza to the room on the other side. We'll meet you there shortly. If you are comfortable with stairs, you can follow me.
Sure, we won't be home.
Steps to be exact. It's actually super cool.
You're welcome to any of the chairs. The room on the side there was the governor's council chambers. The same people who were the justices downstairs who have gone up to be now every other part of the government. They were the justice system downstairs. In here, they're part of the legislative stages. The governor himself is the executive. They're involved in foreign policy and diplomacy. We have the wampum belt in the center of the table there, showing that they're dealing with delegations from various indigenous tribes. So, is anyone missing a phone? Is that yours? Thank you. So, if any of the delegations from tributary tribes had to pay their tribute, essentially they were conquered by the British, and so under the governor's authority, paying tribute or tax to the governor, they would deal with that business here. Sovereign nations, who are foreign powers in their own right, would come here to discuss border disputes, to make trade agreements, treaties, and alliances, and things like that. All happen between their delegations and the governor and his council. So what we've seen so far is all the upper house of government. Everyone working in those spaces has been appointed to that role by the crown, the king or queen at the time. So if they want to keep their job, who do they want to keep happy? King or queen. We'll summarize that as the crown. So the upper house represents the interest of the crown. On the other side, we've got people who are in the lower house of government who are elected into their position. So if they want to keep their job, they want to get reelected, who are they keeping happy? People. So we've got the people's side, the crown side. Where we are now, we have a bridge between them. So we can hopefully get them to work together. Sometimes that's really easy. Things that mean peace and prosperity and security for the people of Virginia means all the same things for the larger British Empire. So they like that, and they can send it on to the king for the next approval step. Sometimes they're a little bit iffy on what the lower house has proposed, and maybe they send it back wanting a few adjustments or changes. Maybe they make different adjustments or changes, and it just ends up bouncing back and forth for a while. If it bounces back and forth too long, we will eventually have a few members from each house come and meet and talk face to face, forming a joint committee here in the joint committee room. We're not that creative with our naming systems. So this is kind of a space to have those 2 points of view come and talk if needed, or just pass messages back and forth. Any questions? And just for a little bit of perspective, when I say this is the government of Virginia, you're not thinking our modern day map, Virginia. If you take a look on the Mitchell map here, this map was made in 1755, considered the most accurate map of British North America at the time. And you can see Virginia runs right through the middle, actually extends upward into the Great Lakes area. Parts of Ohio are territories of Virginia at this time. We don't actually have a western border. We are just going to keep going until we hit coastline and still call it Virginia. That's the way the charts written. So whenever anyone tells you this is the most accurate map of anything, it is the most accurate map according to whoever paid for it. This is a British-made map. It is based on the charters and borders and outlines of the British government and its colonies. So if you ask the French or the Spanish to make a map of North America, some things might be a little different. If you asked any of the indigenous people to make a map of the continent, it would probably look very different, maybe even an entirely different structure. But this tells us what the people in this building are thinking about when they think of Virginia, when they think about where they're responsible for, where their authority extends to. But they are only the government of Virginia. There's a similar body, a similar government system in all of the other 13 colonies, dealing with each of them individually. In 1755, when this map is made, the only thing we really have in common is that we are British colonies. About 20 years later, we're going to decide we don't want to be British colonies anymore. So part of the revolution and the build-up to it will be finding ways to get common ground. Although very different groups of people, communities are drawn to different colonies. Here in Virginia, it's people who feel they can make a profit by growing cash crops. In places like Maryland, Pennsylvania, and the New England colonies, it's religious groups who are looking for a community that focuses on their faith instead of the Church of England as we do here in Virginia. So for the revolution to work, they're going to have to figure out ways to get on the same page with a lot more, even though they have different infrastructure and systems in place. How can they work together towards this shared goal? Any final questions? So as we pass through the smaller room here, that's a committee space that would have just been for kind of smaller groups within the House of Burgesses to splinter off, review laws, make sure everything is still up to date. We haven't just passed a law that contradicts something else, or to even draft bills for new laws. As we pass through there, we'll head on down the stairs to the main House of Burgesses. Take a seat anywhere it's not roped off. Take a seat anywhere it's not roped off. House of Burgesses, we are now, you do have to have been elected into that position. Just keep in mind that in order to vote and choose who gets to sit here, you're going to have to meet all 6 of Virginia's voting requirements. Being a free, white man, 21 or older, in good standing with the Church of England, and owning a significant amount of property. Sound like a whole lot of people? No matter what census we look at, that is somewhere less than 10% of the population of Virginia. By our standards today, we would say we'd like some more people involved in that important decision making. By 18th century standards, this is a point of pride. This is what it means to be British. Because they're comparing it to the rest of Europe and saying those are a lot of absolute monarchies. It is just the king making all the decisions for everybody. This we can say is at least some people who are going to live we have our burgesses in here, they will elect from among each other a Speaker of the House. The building was burning down in 1747. A few people were quick thinking enough to grab this chair and get it out safely. So although we don't have the building itself, we do have a piece of history from this location. But with everyone settled in here, they are now ready to start making decisions that will impact their communities. That can be kind of a short-term or at least occasional issues. Maybe a town is growing a bit and they'd like permission to authorize a new road to be built so they can get in and out more easily. Or it can be things that come up every single year. One of those is taxes. So usually how taxes would work was the British government would tell each colony individually, we need this much money from you, and each colony decides what they want to tax, and as long as they reach their goal, it doesn't matter if Virginia taxes something different than Massachusetts, which is different than Pennsylvania. You all got the money you were asked for, that's what matters. That changes after the French and Indian War. That war begins under King George II, up on the sidewall there, across from his wife, Queen Caroline. It ends under King George III and his wife Queen Charlotte on the back there. So now we've got a new young king on the throne, his government saying, congratulations, you just won your grandfather's war, that's great. That was a really expensive war, we have no money to do anything else now. So in order to try to get that revenue coming in faster, he and his parliament get the idea of saying, well, instead of letting all the colonies decide amongst themselves, write us letters telling us what they decided, get that approved, and then finally start collecting the money, let's just pick something that we in parliament have already approved to tax and extend that tax throughout the empire. Same thing, same everywhere. From their point of view, that makes sense. Parliament is an elected body, so it's still within that idea of representative government making decisions. But when we hear about it here in the colonies, we're quick to point out, yeah, Parliament is representative of the people in England. They're the only ones who get to vote for the members of Parliament. So we had no say in that. We had no voice in saying what we can afford to pay a tax on, what's reasonable for us. So with that, we will see protests happening all across the colonies. Enough that some of those first attempts do get repealed. The Stamp Act is one of the first that is taken back. But they'll keep trying to do this every so often, and the colonies continue to protest. Usually we all agree we'll stop buying the thing that's being taxed because that's the most obvious way to protest a tax. But some colonies want to go a bit further and really demonstrate how much they don't agree with these. And when you make the biggest demonstration, when you get the most attention in your protest, you get the most punishment. An example of that is, if I say there's a tax on tea, what is the first thing everybody thinks about? Boston Tea Party. Boston threw many pounds of tea into the harbor, destroying it, and they got the most attention, and then they got the entire port shut down. Nothing came in or out of Boston anymore. That doesn't hurt us in Virginia. We have our own ports. We have everything we need coming in and out, but we don't like the pattern this will create. Because now that the government has said we are willing to shut down a port, it could be us next time, because we don't know who's going to make the biggest protest next time. So we start to coordinate and plan together. We'll say, okay, all the colonies talk to each other, make the same protest at the same time, then nobody gets singled out and gets that more extreme punishment, but we still have a very large, widespread impact. That idea of communicating and planning together develops into the Continental Congress up in Philadelphia, where now members of each colony are sent to represent them and talk and make decisions as one. And the most important decision they will make is to declare independence in July of 1776. That is when this becomes a revolution. There was already fighting and there was already bloodshed happening, but that was British subjects trying to correct the current system. With the Declaration of Independence, we're saying we don't want to be British anymore, we want to make something new. That does mean there's going to be more fighting and more bloodshed to come, but it also means more conversations in rooms like this, because if we're not going to be British, we have to figure out what we are going to be. People in rooms like this have to decide, what are we creating that's worth fighting for? Each individual colony will make its own now state constitution, because it still has unique infrastructures, unique needs and communities that it has to address, but we'll also create a united constitution that idea of shared goals we're working towards together. First among them is that we are trying to form a more perfect union, which means we just gave ourselves a goal we can't finish. No matter how good you get, there's always a little bit more room for perfect.